Hello and welcome to this T-Level Tactics video for Root Core 1 of the T-Level Digital Support Services course. In this video, we're looking at smarter change. We're going to look at three things. First of all, we're going to identify some risks associated with change. Before analysing the impact of change on an organisation. And finally, creating some smarter objectives for a change project. Before we get started, these videos are not sponsored or endorsed by any education institution or qualification awarding body, and T-Level Tactics videos should not be used as a replacement to classroom learning, as the discussion and practical activities with your peers and lecturer will help to expand your thinking and comprehension. Instead, these materials are best used as preparation material or revision to reinforce your learning. Also, these videos cover the same content and required knowledge for Root Core 1 of the T-Level Digital Business Services course. However, they will be more contextualised towards IT support roles. Let's get started with our first topic of risks. So, what problems could arise during a change? What could halt progress during the project, or potentially reduce the overall effectiveness of the change? Have a think about when schools and businesses made the change to remote learning and working during the COVID-19 pandemic. This change had to happen in a very short time frame, almost immediately. What kind of risks were there that organisations would have had to consider? Well, some of those things might be hardware ability. Do all staff or students have access to computers, webcams, microphones, the right equipment for remote working and learning? Internet access was something that was quite a priority. Do people have suitable bandwidth for video conferencing and voice over IP applications? And more to the point, does everybody have internet access at home? Do people have an appropriate workspace to do working and learning in? Do they have a quiet space for productive work and concentration away from distractions? And can users access the hardware and files that they need to? What about physical resources they may need to use? They may have had to share some hardware, such as laptops or desktops, with other people in their household, reducing their ability to work or study. And there's also a concern for quality control, and is the work or learning being produced of the same standard as if they were in the workplace or at school? Now, there are some common risks to all change projects, and these can usually be controlled or mitigated through good planning. You could encounter resistance from staff or different teams in an organisation. For instance, you could find that there's a low number of users adopting the change and using new processes to improve productivity. In fact, this could cause decreased productivity and potential increase in errors in data entry, for example. You could find that new tools and processes are not being used in the right way. You'll find data inaccuracies, inefficient workflows, reduced effectiveness. It could be that once the change is implemented, perhaps the right support isn't in place. You could find that perhaps the infrastructure behind all of it isn't suitable. There could be insufficient network bandwidth or server capacity, and you could encounter system performance issues and potentially further downtime. You could also find that the change, while it functions, potentially stalls or impedes workflows. Workflows will be disrupted, potentially leading to customer service issues, missed opportunities, and decreased employee morale. And there could also be issues with knowledge management, and this is something that you'll likely encounter further down the line, where a lack of documentation during the train, or training amongst different people, or having a redundancy in knowledge, could lead to issues in the future with other projects and other changes. Now, that's a brief look at some risks, and if you're a Patreon member, it's time to have a look at the first task on the task sheet that's available from patreon.com/T-Level Tactics. And it's all about mitigations and what you can do to try and prevent different risks. So download that task sheet, have a look, complete the first task, spend about 10 minutes on it. Pause the video here, have a go, then come back and carry on with the second part. So let's have a look at what change can do. While we want to make change with the best intentions, how are we going to know that it's going to be worthwhile? We know that changes in organisations involve time, money, and staff. And in order to effect change, we're going to need to convince a business to commit their resources to it. Any time a core process has changed, we could use an impact analysis to justify the changes we're proposing. Using an impact analysis, we can clearly define the change we want to do and the reasons why. We can define timescales that this change will take, identify who's going to be impacted by the change, what areas of the organisation are going to be impacted. We can create a baseline for existing performance in that area, and how the change is going to affect that workflow and process. We'll also have an opportunity to quantify potential benefits and perform a risk analysis. But what about once the change has been implemented? How do we know that it's been effective? And more importantly, is it having the effect we want? Well, we can collect both qualitative and quantitative evidence. Qualitative being verbal or written feedback or potentially results from a survey or questionnaire. And quantitative data being things like increased revenue, cost savings, time savings, anything that gives us numbers, quantifiable information. Now, based on all of this information, we can monitor change and its effectiveness. We can quickly implement tweaks to improve effectiveness if something isn't quite right. We can change or create alternative solutions. We could potentially roll back to a previous process if there are issues with the change we've implemented. Now, for your Patreon member, there's an opportunity to do an impact analysis on the task sheet for Task 2. It'll take about 20 minutes, but it'll give you a good idea of what might be involved if you need to do an impact analysis in an organisation. Have a go at that, pause the video here, spend 20 minutes on it, and come back for the final part of the lesson. Let's have a look at smarter objectives. How do we know when a change has been achieved and we've done everything we wanted? How do we know when the project comes to an end? This is where we can use smarter objectives to help us. Now, you may have used SMART objectives before, or you may have known them as SMART targets, but smarter objectives add in some extra elements. Smarter objectives are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, and here are the extra bits, are evaluated and re-evaluated. Let's have a look at what this means, starting with specific. The objectives should be clear, specific, and well defined, such as what do we want to accomplish? Why is it important to do this? Who could be involved? Where is it going to take place? And what resources are needed to do this? Measurable means that objectives should be quantifiable and measurable to track progress and determine success. How are we going to know when the objective is achieved? What metrics or indicators will be used to measure progress? Achievable objectives are realistic and attainable within the constraints of resources, time, and the organization's capabilities. Can we deliver the expected quality for this change? Can the objective be delivered within budget? Is it going to be achieved within the time allotted? Objectives should be relevant and aligned with the overall goals and priorities of the organization. We could ask, does the objective align with existing strategic objectives? Does it contribute to the overall organization mission? And are the technologies that we're going to use still going to be relevant in the next few years? Objectives should also have a specific time frame or deadline for completion. When is this objective going to be achieved? What's the timeline for this change project? Are there any external or additional time constraints or considerations that we need to take into account? Now, the evaluate part of smarter objectives means that we have a mechanism for ongoing evaluation to assess progress of the change, identify any challenges, and make adjustments as needed. How are we going to evaluate and measure it throughout the process? And how are we going to make sure we're still on track to achieve what we set out to do? And finally, re-evaluate means we're going to periodically review and reassess to assure that what we've implemented is still relevant and is still effective. So how and when are we going to review this? And what criteria are we going to use to determine if further adjustments are necessary? If we think back to the ITIL service value chain from a few videos ago, this re-evaluate stage forms part of that continual improvement element. So by incorporating the evaluate and re-evaluate components into smart objectives, it lets us enhance that goal-setting process with continuous monitoring, feedback, and adaptation to changing circumstances. It helps us to drive that continuous improvement process and increase success in the organisation. So for Patreon members, it's time to return to that task sheet and have a go at creating some smarter objectives for a scenario. I think it's probably going to take somewhere between 30 to 45 minutes. And it's for the scenario that we've already looked at in task 2. So pause the video here, have a go at task 3, and then come back after 30 to 45 minutes and we'll just summarise what we've done so far and finish things off with an exam question. Okay, so we've identified some risks associated with change management. We've analysed the impact of change on an organisation, and we've also looked at smarter objectives and how to go at creating some. So you should be ready to have a go at this exam-style question. Explain the concept of smarter objectives and why they are important in the change management process. There are 4 marks available here, so you should be looking to make 4 points about smarter objectives and why they're important. And that brings us to the end of the video. In the next video, we'll be looking at change requests. So if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel yet at T-Level Tactics, make sure you click that subscribe button. And if you haven't looked at the Patreon page yet, do head over to patreon.com/T-Level Tactics and see what's available for all the members over there. Thanks for watching and see you next time.